We need to talk Rob Reiner updates and continued Trump fallout around it. And so, starting with updates around the case itself, we've now gotten reports that Rob and his wife Michele, they got into a very loud argument with their son Nick at a party at Conan O'Brien's home before leaving Saturday night. And of course, when their bodies were found the next morning, Nick was the prime suspect, hence why he's now reportedly in jail on suspicion of murder without bail. And we've seen photos of the moment that he was arrested. Right, and so reportedly he was at a subway station 15 miles from his parents' house. You could see the cops shoving him to the ground, handcuffing him. You had hotel staff reportedly finding blood all over the shower of his room, a trail of blood leading off his bed, and bed sheets covering the window. And so police, they said they'd presented their case to the LA district attorney, and prosecutors are expected to file charges by the end of Wednesday. But then all of that, it brings us to continued reactions. And where we'll start here is just a quick refresher of Trump's post, right? Because he started his post almost seeming like a regular person before again revealing, hey, it's me, I'm a deranged monster, with him posting a very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away together with his wife Michele, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before. May Rob and Michele rest in peace. And in case anyone had any doubts if that was official, the White House's rapid response account on X also reposted it. Right, and then later on, when a reporter was like, hey, Mr. President, surely you didn't really mean it like that, we saw this.
Do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. It was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all, in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
And that, to many, it was jarring, not only because he called this tragically murdered, beloved filmmaker deranged for having different politics than him, but also because he referred to himself in the third person as Trump.
He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned.
Which I guess, to stick with Trump's theme here, let me say, Philip DeFranco thinks that Donald Trump is a disgusting fucking monster. Like, many already feel that and know that, but to see him handle a softball situation like this, to be like, wow, that was fucking horrific, thoughts and prayers. But no, instead he did his Trump thing. And so while, you expected the universal outrage and disgust from the entire left wing of the political spectrum.
It's so hateful and vile. When I first saw it, I thought it was fake. My wife showed it to me this morning. I was like, well, even for him, that seemed like too much, but nothing is ever too much for him.
You then also had people to the right of them chiming in, or even the likes of Piers Morgan sounding off.
That just crosses every line of just basic human decency.
But also, the most surprising reactions came from the MAGA right, where with nearly all the big names with anything to say about this expressing some form of discomfort or disgust. And I say nearly because, some took a different tack, which we'll get into. But, you had the talking heads on Fox News seemingly pretty much unanimous on Trump's post.
I have to say that for the President of the United States to take this family tragedy in which both Reiner and his wife were killed and say that it's because of Trump derangement syndrome, I thought was well beneath him and beneath the office, and I think it would have been better if the president had made no comment.
You also had several Republican lawmakers chiming in, including, as we saw yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also Mike Lawler, Stephanie Bice, and John Kennedy.
I think when the president says these sorts of things, it detracts from his policy achievements.
But still, it was crickets from most of the GOP, with Senator Thomas Massie even commenting, I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the VP and White House staff, will just ignore it because they're afraid. And in response to that, the GOP leadership was basically like, yeah. Senate Majority Leader John Thune declining to comment on Trump's post when asked about it by reporters, and House Speaker Mike Johnson essentially saying it's not worth his time.
I don't do ongoing commentary about everything that's said by everybody in government every day.
We are the president of the United States.
We are trying to bring down healthcare costs for the American people.
Which, embarrassing on its own, but even fucking Nick Fuentes had enough of a spine to criticize Trump for this.
This is ugly rhetoric. It is ugly. It is actually evil. Nobody deserves that. I don't care what their politics are, what they said on the internet or on television. Now, if Trump were actually doing what he promised to do, you could overlook the fact that he's a douchebag. Well, what's actually the pitch now? You go on True Social and make a joke about Trump derangement syndrome? It just goes to show there was never anything there. There was never a center. It was always empty. You thought at one time that Trump really believed in America, believed in people, or something. I think he believes honestly in nothing.
But with all that said, you did have a handful of people on the right actually taking Trump's side. Though I'll say in a few different ways, right? First, you had the likes of Jack Posobiec, right? He's one of the people whose post claiming that nobody on the right was celebrating Reiner's murder aged like moldy cheese, and he desperately tried to save face with a follow-up post writing, "Libs are trying to community note this with Trump's post. Where's the celebration in Trump's post? He isn't celebrating, he is warning." Then on a level of directness even higher than that, you had Trump advisor Alex Brusewitz writing, "I'm not going to participate in the fake outrage at President Trump for his response to Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner called for Trump to be arrested and charged with treason, a crime punishable by death. He was quite nasty toward the president. Regardless, RIP." And then finally, the most direct and unashamed of them all is the ghoul that is Laura Loomer, who wrote, "Psychosis is a real thing. Rob Reiner had a level of TDS that likely exuded a level of craziness around those he spent time with. Many people who have crazy kids have psychiatric issues themselves. You'll notice a lot of celebrities have kids with addictions, trans kids, gay kids, spoiled kids, kids who commit crimes, and kids who are total deadbeat losers because many were raised to have no accountability by parents who subscribe to hardcore liberalism. Trump is right. Reiner himself sounded insane when he would speak. Imagine how crazy his own kid was, on drugs." But then, one last point I want to touch on with this news is something that's arguably in the same ballpark as Trump's post, but it's gotten far less attention. And that is the call for a mass expulsion of Muslims from the United States. Because after the anti-Semitic terror attack in Australia, you have two Republican congressmen not even bothering to qualifying their target as radical Muslims. They're just attacking Islam as a whole. And so you have Tommy Tuberville writing, "Islam is not a religion, it's a cult. Islamists aren't here to assimilate, they're here to conquer. Stop worrying about offending the pearl clutchers. We've got to send them home now or we'll become the United Caliphate of America." As well as Randy Fine saying, "This has to stop. Diversity is not our strength. Diversity has become suicidal." Saying it is time for a Muslim travel ban, radical deportations of all mainstream Muslim legal and illegal immigrants, and citizenship revocations wherever possible. Mainstream Muslims have declared war on us. The least we can do is kick them the hell out of America. And then adding, "Islamophobia isn't real. Fear of Islam is rational." When you know it, just like the Trump post, Mike Johnson office refused to comment on Tuberville and Fine's comments when asked about them by the Washington Post. But also, as someone pointed out, this kind of unabashed Islamophobia, it's not new. It's been festering for a long time. Many saw it, of course, with Donald Trump as far back as 2015.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
And now more recently, he's called Somali immigrants garbage, advocated deporting all of them, and said that Ilhan Omar should be stripped of her citizenship and kicked out. Right? And also last month, you had Representative Brandon Gill saying much of the same as Tuberville and Fine did. Now with him writing, "We imported Islamic terrorism in just the last few decades through our suicidal immigration system. It was a policy choice. The reality is that not all cultures are morally equal. Islam is incompatible with our culture and our governing system. Radical Islamists seek to fundamentally destroy our way of life. Why would we allow them to immigrate here? Islamic ideology has no place in the West, and it's time our immigration system recognizes this." With then the House Freedom Caucus commenting on that post, "True." But then also even supposedly more moderate conservatives like Ben Shapiro seemed to suggest yesterday that Muslim immigration as a whole is dangerous.
There are good people inside every religion. The question, of course, is whether when you import an enormous number of people of any particular religion, that changes the culture of the country, or whether it creates enclaves that are dangerous to the rest of the country.
And of course, all of this despite the fact that Muslim groups and Arab governments, they widely condemned the violence in Australia and elsewhere. And of course, I mean, the guy who tackled one of the shooters was himself a Muslim. But, for now, we're gonna have to wait to see how this continues to play out. And of course, in the meantime, I'd love to know your reactions to everything that's going down.